Let's go.
We're doing it. We're doing it live. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hey, what's going on, everybody?
Hey.
Hello.
Hey.
Time for another workshop about events.
Yeah.
Let's just run down the schedule really quick, and then we'll get into it. So we're going to start by talking about events in general. What's an event? Creating events, adding properties, and then reporting events and all the different ways that you can do that. Then we got a couple demos for you on the editor side. We're going to look at the health bar that Michael created and added some sound effects to. And then we're going to go into the more complex NeoStream example that's going to show you all of the different properties and events that you can use. And then we'll do a view of that for the runtime as well. And then, if we have time and we don't have too many questions, we might try to live code the health bar example and put some sound effects on that to show you the whole workflow. So let's go ahead and get into it. So let's start with, what is an event? Well, events are simply something that helps you coordinate runtime code with states or animations. So things that you might want to coordinate are things like sound effects, URLs. Gordon, throw me a lifeline. What are some other examples?
Some other examples would be, now I'm hitting a blank as well. Any event, so anything you want to send down from your animation to your runtime code. Some practical examples would be a button that needs a hover event. Other examples could be semantic information. So if you want a screen reader to announce something if a certain action occurs in your animation, like Robert said, audio, essentially anything. I think those are probably the most common examples.
And you'll see a lot of those today, especially in the NeoStream example. So there's a lot of good use cases for events. So let's start talking about how to even create an event. All right, I'm gonna go full screen with the editor here, so we got all this helpful stuff. All right, so to create an event, you can use the event tool up here, or you can hit Shift and E, and that will activate the event tool, and then you can click anywhere on the artboard, and that will create a new event. Now, from there, we've got some properties in the inspector that we can change. The first thing is the event name. So for this, we want to call this something like, would we call this something like sound, Gordon, or how would you want to name the actual event?
In the example that we'll see, we are going to use sound. But yeah, this is essentially personal preference. It also depends on, like, maybe if you want in the future to make your events more robust so that you can have some way to easily distinguish between like a certain naming convention. But ultimately it doesn't matter. You can call it whatever you want, as long as it's something unique that you can search for at runtime.
All right, so we'll call this my first cool event in that case. So the names are really important, especially when it comes to the runtime. So just make sure that you're naming these something that is easily identifiable by both you and your developer. Or you, if you're both a designer and a developer. From there, we've got the type of event. So there's two types of events. There's general events, and we'll use these when we want to communicate anything like sounds, HTML events, basically the general event outside of just throwing a URL. And that's the other type. We have an open URL, and you'll see that the difference between open URL and the general event is that the open URL gives you a URL property that you can code. So we can go to www.myspace.com if we want to, or any other URL like that. So you'd add that here, and then you also have this target. Now, the target does a few different things. It tells the browser that you're in how to actually open up the URL. So on blank, This will open up the link in a new tab. The parent will open it up in the parent browsing context of the opens in the parent. You know what? It opens in the parent browsing context of the current one. I don't know what that means. Gordon, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's. I think our docs for that probably need some updating. Zach's terminology is better than ours. Yeah, the simple description would be you're talking about parent.
Yep.
So that would open it in the parent frame or tab of the current frame or tab you're in. So as an example, if I'm not mistaken, if you are in an iframe, then the link should open in the parent context of the tab. So not within the iframe, but in that iframe's parent.
All right, what about self?
That would open it in the same frame or tab that you're currently in. So
Okay.
basically replacing what you have now.
And then top?
That would be the top level browsing context. So that would replace any frames or iframes. Yeah.
All right, cool. Now, if you want a full description of this, make sure you check out the docs and you can read what each one of these does. Or you can just play around with it and commit that to memory.
The default is blank, and it's probably what you would want in most instances.
Because that'll open it up in a new tab.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the open URL event. Let's go back to the general event. There's also position properties for your events. Now, because it exists on the artboard, it needs position properties. You probably will not be animating this property at all. So, you can really stick it wherever you want. And then the last thing are the actual properties. Now, this is what gets into the nitty-gritty of the communication between the actual event and the runtimes. So when we add that, we can add as many as we want. We want to give this a property name. So if we're gonna make a sound, we might want to say step sound 1. And then we could add the string, or just we could call this sound, and then the string name could be step sound 1, something like that. We could also do a number, and this number could, let's say we have a rating value, we could call it rating. We could say the rating is 0, the rating is 1, the rating is 2, the rating is 3, or we could have a Boolean, and that could be is hovered. In the event that we're doing like a hovered state, and we can set it to false or true, whatever we want. Now, the properties here are animatable properties. So if we go into animate mode and go to a timeline, you can see that this property here, we can key. So in the event that we want to show that something is being hovered, we would do something like, okay, is hovered is true. Now, just because you've marked it true here doesn't mean that it's actually going up to the runtimes. So if we want to actually report the event and have the runtimes be able to see that event, we also need to hit this report event button. So boom, now the runtimes are going to know that this event is actually reported. Now, since we put this on the timeline, when we stick it in the state machine, when the playhead gets over this, these keys that we created, you'll see that there's a little visual indicator on the artboard that actually shows you the event firing. Now we can change that. We can stick it halfway through. So you can see at the beginning it doesn't play, and then when we get halfway through, it actually reports that event and you get the little boof. Now, there's other ways that we can report events. We don't have to stick it on a timeline. I'm sorry, I hit my delete key so hard there that I popped it off. Let me put that back on. Thank you. All right. The other ways that we can do this is by actually putting them directly on a state. So we can use, when we select the state or transition, you'll see that we have this little events area down here in the properties. And we can add an event. And let's say we're doing it on a timeline. We can say, ooh, I want to report my first cool event. And we can either do that when the state enters, that's on start, or when it actually exits the state on the end. Now we're going to be updating the verbiage here because start and end on a state is a little confusing. But the way to think about it right now, if you're using it in the meantime, is that when you enter the state, that's the start. And when you exit the state, that's the end. Again, we're going to be changing the verbiage on that soon. Now, on a transition, it's the same thing. We can report my first cool event at either the start of the transition, and that's when it leaves the previous state, or at the end of the transition, when it actually gets fully into the next state. Now, the last way that you can report an event is through a listener. So we can add a new listener event, which is fire, or a new listener action, which is fire an event. And then on that listener, whatever this is, so whether it's pointer enter, pointer down, pointer up, mouse move, whatever you want it to be, we can select our event and make sure that it's reported. Now, one big difference between just reporting an event and what we did on the timeline, which is setting an event property, so like a Boolean being true or a sound being a particular string like step, is that when we're just reporting an event, we're letting the runtimes know that, hey, this event happened. When you actually change the event property, the runtimes knows exactly what property that you're setting. So there's going to be times where you want to make sure that you're actually setting the property in the timeline and firing it, or you're just firing it through the event. Or, so through the state, transition, or listener. So those are the two big differences there. Do we have any questions on that? Gordon, did I cover that sufficiently?
Yeah, I think so. I think the only thing, well, I'm sure you're going to talk about listeners next, but yeah, no, I think that covers the gist of it.
I think didn't I just talk about listeners?
Oh, sorry, I was reading Zach's comments.
All right, well, since Gordon's given the thumbs up, we're going to go ahead and jump into the practical examples because all of this is just theory until we actually see it put into practice. So we're going to start with Michael, and Michael's going to show off the health bar that he created, that he eventually added sound to through events. So Michael, take it away.
There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
I got it. All right, so so this is the health bar I've been working on, and the idea with this is that eventually I knew we'd want to add some sound effects, and so I wrote up a few lines and had Robert do some amazing voiceover work, but then we needed a way to implement these, so events was the best solution here. So if I go ahead and play through this, I'll just go ahead and click the character here, and if you keep your eye on these little event icons, you can kind of see when they're firing. So when I click or when he gets hit, and then after a bit, you see this after hit saying event fires as well.
So I'm guessing that first event is on a listener.
It could be, but it is not in this case.
Oh.
So that's, I guess that opens up another discussion and something that, after adding these events, it's good to talk to the dev, and it could very well have been on a listener in this case. But I'm going to show you how I did set this up. But first we'll go over the actual events here. So we've got this hit sound effect. And so what the idea here was, this would be the sound effect that would play when the character gets hit. And there's a few different options. And then this after hit saying would occur a little bit after he gets hit. So I needed to figure out a way to play that, or to have that event fire after he's hit. And so we'll take a look at how we ended up figuring out that. But for both of these, it's just set to a type general. And we've named this one hit sound and set that to a number. And this one's general as well. And after hit audio is the property name here, and set that to a number as well. The thinking here that there would be multiple variations on these. So Gordon can kind of explain if that makes sense and what he ended up doing to implement that. So if we go into our state machine here and look at these head loop and hit animations, this is where I actually ended up adding the the events. So for each of these hit animations, I ended up just adding the hit sound effect at the start or at the entry of that state, and then the after hit saying at the end. And because these all play with an exit time of 100, they'll actually play all the way through that state. And then once it leaves, it'll call this after hit saying. So we go ahead and play this again. You can kind of see if you watch these states here and watch these. So do both. Watch two places at once. But that's the idea, is that it's all based on, you know, the position or the progress of those states. So that's kind of the basics of how this was set up. So yeah, nothing too complicated. I did have a few discussions with Gordon, and so there's still some things to iron out in terms of, you know, when is an event really necessary, and I'm sure he can speak more to that. But
yeah, I think that actually goes into the question that Jeff asks. He asked if property values can be updated from runtime code, and the short answer is that you probably don't want to, unless in the future events evolve to allow you to do more things at design time, so within the editor. For now, you should think of events of a way to send information from the animation to your runtime code. If you are updating an events property from runtime code, there's no real need in it, because if you're doing it from runtime, you will already know about it. You can think of events of a way of communicating stuff that your runtime would not know. As an example, the runtime would not know when to play Michael's after hit saying. It wouldn't know when to play the hit sound unless you send that event to the runtime. And the opposite of this would be updating inputs from your runtime. So it's this one-way communication or one-way road. Update inputs from runtime, send events from animation to runtime.
All right. Well, like I said, if we have some time at the end, we're going to live. Well, no, we are not. The Dark Magician Gordon will be attempting to live code and add the sound effects to this file. But we do have some stuff to look at. We've got another example, which is the NeoStream example that JC worked on and Gordon added all the implementation to. So we're going to look at the NeoStream example next, and then we'll look at the runtime implementation of that. And it has all of the different things in it. So we've got URLs, we've got all kinds of different general things, sound effects. So JC, take it away.
Yeah, so first I'm going to play the animation to understand what happened here. So you can see that the character appears, then he appears, the different options, the different buttons, and now you can hover and you can see the names, and you can move the cursor over the character, and the character try to avoid, no? And you can hit the character. So this is the idea, and you can drop the character. So this is the animation. You can see here, this is the state machine with all the actions of the character when hit the character or when the character jump. And then I have two layers more, one for the idle of the flames, and the other for when I hover each of these flames. So let's see the event. Here, there is all the events we use here, because we use different things. We use sound, we report URL, different things. So the first thing we have here is this event that say intro complete. And this is because in the web, the idea is when the character appears, make this animation where all the flame is appeared. In that moment, when this animation finishes, we want that text appear here in the web, no? And the way to report to the runtimes, okay, now this animation is finished, is using this event. So here you can see that this event is a general event, and the way this event is applied is here in this state, in the intro. Here you can see when this event is fired in the end, when exit this state. So here you can see that the animation is playing, and when jump to the next animation, fire the event. So this is one way to report something happened, this is finished, now you know that this happened. No? Then we have this other event, button hover, that basically say to the runtimes every time you hover in these different options. And here you can see that this event have different properties, have a Boolean and string. And the Boolean is to detect when you hover or not. And you can see that here in the animations, in the animation of each of these flames, there is in the state, there is an event that reported when you hover with the Boolean. And in the animation, in each of the animation of the flame, there is another that reported this hovering and the type. And here, depending of the flame, we report what is the option. No? It's products, community, it's linear. So this way, the runtime know when you hover and what product you hover in that moment. Then we have another, the sound. You can see, okay, so this is the event for hover. This is the sound, sorry. Here, this is to report every time we play with the character and activate the different sounds. So here, this event, you can see that the property is a string, and the idea is add the different name of the sound. So in this case, this event is applied in the different states, sorry, in the different animations of the action. No? For example, when the character jump, here, come on, oh, this is false, is this animation. You can see here that we have the sound events, and we report the name of this sound, because the sound is different when the character jump or when we hit the character.
Hey, JC.
Yeah.
Do you mind going into a non-full screen mode so we can see the state machine a little bit better?
Okay.
Kind of small.
Yeah. Let me try one thing. One moment. One moment. It's too small, no?
Yeah.
Okay. Moment. I'm working on, don't worry. Got it. It's better now?
Oh, it's so much nicer.
Yeah. Sorry. So yeah, we saw that in this animation that the character fall, I open the animation, we can see the event with the name of the sound. If I go to another animation like this, when I hit the character for this side, you can see that the event here with the name of the sound that is different is hit. No? So this is the other way. And the last one is, in this case, when I can hover in the different flames, and when I click, the idea is that jump to another web, no? another link, in this case of product or community. And you can see we have an event for each of these flames to report when I click, send me to this link. And the way we apply this is using, in this case, the listener. You can see here the listener. When I click, in this case, when I release, I click, and when I release, report the web. And you can see here, for example, for the product, that the type is URL, and the web is here. So this is the different events that we apply here. Now, Gordon, we're going to show the how it works in the runtime.
Cool. Yeah. I think I'm going to preface this by saying, don't end the stream now. Continue watching. Even if you don't code, I think it's important to get the full picture, because at this stage, events are mostly exciting for developers, because this allows you to do things at runtime that otherwise would have been impossible to do. And yeah, this will definitely help out with understanding the fuller context of events. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yep.
Okay, so now you should actually hear audio events coming through as well. So you'll see as we hover, it sends an audio event. And these events that JC talked about, as we updated the names, depending on the linear animation that's playing, these are now propagating through so that you can actually know what sound to play at runtime. And the code for this is really not that complicated. Once you have this pattern of what event you are expecting from runtime or from the animation, you can quickly build something really awesome. And it can be abstracted out so that you can reuse this logic across all of your animations. As an example, if you know a sound has a sound name property, then always play a sound. So if we, I think we're going to take this and just go backwards with how we normally go about coding. So in the next example, we'll code from scratch. Now we're just going to take stuff away. If you are completely new to our runtimes, definitely take a look at the help documentation. We have various different samples that provide more beginner-friendly use cases. But I do think this is it's a nice beginner-friendly one as well. In general, what we're doing right now is this is using the web runtime. We have our HTML page. And if we take a look at the animation from a starting perspective, you'll see that there's some HTML elements that aren't showing. And once the animation completes, those start to fade in. And this is another use case for events, is delaying an action or determining what action to do at the precise time. In this instance, it's receiving an event to say, show the HTML elements because the intro animation is complete. But yeah, this isn't too important. What we actually care about is the logic of how these events work. So you can take a look at the full example in your own time. What we're doing here is just constructing our animation that we want to play. We're specifying the canvas that we want to attach it to. So this is an HTML canvas. We are specifying the animation name, the state machine name, auto playing true. And this is a new property that we will touch on in a moment. We're doing some layout for animation, and then finally resizing it so that as you are changing the window size, it's resizing the drawing surface to the canvas so that your animation remains crisp and clear. The new thing that we want to talk about in this video is this right here. And what we're doing is we're getting a reference to our arrive instance that we created at the top here. And we're adding this listener to it. And we're listening for arrive event. So each time arrive event is going to be triggered in your animation or state machine, the onArrive event received method will be triggered. And this is a method that you need to define in code. So if we take this from the ground up, I'm just going to replace all of the code. And if we play animation, you'll see it's exactly the same animation. The only difference is we're no longer receiving any audio. And you'll also note that the HTML elements isn't there. And that is because we aren't handling these events. If we take a look at what is actually coming through let's just log what is happening. Okay, you'll see immediately we received a few events. If we inspect these, let me just zoom in. You'll see we get a type Rive event, which is what we expected. This is has a data object. It has a button hover, so I guess I hovered while the animation was still playing. You'll see it also fired a lot of hover events just now. And if you inspect all of these, you'll note that it's exactly the events that JC showed us in the editor. So this is a sound event, and it's expecting you to play the sound name pop. And this is another Rive event, sound. This expects you to play the sound name wind. So if we clear this, and if I do a hover, you'll see we get a Rive event. That's going to be the hover, which is true, and there's going to be the hover, which is false. And as you can see, it is exactly that. So now the next step would be to actually do some computational logic based on the event that we receive. So what we'll do is we'll extract the event name, because we need that to determine what type of event it is. And on that, we're just going to create this switch statement. So if you're new to programming, a switch statement basically loops over possible values. It's a switch case statement. So as an example, we're saying if the event name is intro complete, then do this code block over here. If it's button hover, do this code block over here. Okay, so for now, let's actually just keep the intro event button hover, and I'm just going to disable this playing sound by name. And if we restart, you'll see a few things. Hover is working now, and you will also note that the sound is working. And that is because I'm cheating a little bit in this code and probably doing something that wouldn't scale well in a bigger application. And that is because I'm attaching the sound to play when the hover is happening as well. But you'll note that the wind or the duck animation, the punches, those aren't playing because those are tied to the sound event that JC made. So as an example, you'll also see that our HTML is there because the intro complete did fire. So in simple terms, what's happening? Let's take a look at the button hover. We get the button hover event. This is triggered. And we're checking to see if it has the property is hovering, which is going to be a Boolean. So if this is true, then we play the audio, fireball audio, and we also set the cursor to be a pointer. And if you've been programming with, or if you've been incorporating Rive animations from a programming perspective, you might really appreciate this right here. Being able to now just quickly set a pointer for buttons is something that would have been otherwise not difficult to do, but very cumbersome to do. And this makes it so much better. And yeah, this is a good example for me of what events makes really easy.
Now, Gordon, 2 questions, just really quickly. Sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
Is this the high-level or low-level JS runtime?
This is the high-level runtime. Just for clarity, because it can be confusing, high-level means slightly easier. It's the thing that surfaces to the top, what you'll encounter first. Once you go lower down in the depths, it becomes, you'll be able to do more, but it also involves a bit more coding. So this is definitely the high-level runtime.
All right. And then second question, what is the delay property?
That's an excellent question. If we take a look at our console, where we are logging it, stop logging it, sorry. You'll note that all of these has a delay attached to them. And this delay is basically the time since it was reported in the animation versus when your runtime code received it. And you may ask yourself, why is there a delay? And that is because most animations are driven in a frame-by-frame way, meaning that when your computer syncs a new frame to display, the whole canvas is re-rendered and Rive syncs up with that. So from a coding perspective, it may occur that the event is happening between a frame. So for example, like if you are displaying your event or reporting your event on the timeline, it may happen in an update cycle in between these frame refreshes. So this is what this delay is. Normally it would be something similar to this, 0.016, meaning the time since it was reported versus when your runtime received it. And it's also because the events are reported in a batched way. So all of the events between two frames are collected and then sent on off to the next frame to be taken into account for your runtime. And this will allow you to do very precise, as an example, audio playback. So if you need to play the punch at the exact precise time, you could advance your animation. You can advance the sound effect by this time frame or this time step, and then play it so that you know it's playing at the exact time. You can expect this number to be the same as the refresh rates of your screen normally, but it may occur that an animation lags for whatever reason. If it's a really complicated animation, or if something is happening from a system perspective to do cleanup and potentially the animation misses a frame or two, this time may be slightly longer. So yeah, it's a very useful property to have. Did that answer the question, Robert?
I'm going to say yes. That is a great answer. Yes, Jeff says thank you, which means it was answered. And also, hello, Freddie. Good to see you. Okay, Gordon.
Cool.
Continue to blow our minds.
Yeah, I think the button hover is probably, from this point, it's kind of repetitive what we're doing, but in a similar fashion, when we get the sound event, just as a reminder, this is the name of the event, then we will actually call this play sound by name method. And if we, sorry, let me just get that out of the way. If we jump to the play sound by name, this takes in the properties. I'm not using types here, so if you're a TypeScript elitist, sorry for that. Essentially, what we're getting here is the properties from the arrive event. Well, actually, no, we're getting the string sound name because that's what I'm passing in. And here I'm just simply checking to see what the name is. And depending on the name, I'm playing a different sound. And if you are interested, if we take a look at the play pop sound, it just creates a new audio object and then calls play on that. And yeah, that's literally that. It's these three cases where we look for intro complete, we update the HTML, button hover, do some button stuff, sound, play some sounds. And then there's this little catch here at the bottom, which you can steal. If you didn't handle an event, then maybe you should. It should log at the bottom here as an unhandled event. And we'll actually see that here. If we start our demo, and I don't see the animation. There we go. You'll see that nothing's in the console. If I actually click pricing, you won't see it. It does navigate into a new web browser, but we get this little log, unhandled event pricing. And that is just because I'm not handling URL events. So you may be wondering how does URLs work? Like why is the URLs working but the event is unhandled? That is because Rive will still report all of the events, but you can opt in to automatically handle certain events. At this stage, the automatic events that will be handled for you are URL events. And in the future, there may be more. But at this stage, we only have these 2 events, general and URL. So if you opt in for this automatically handle events, then links will automatically open for you if you are using the web runtime. Worth noting that the other runtimes do not implement this automatic behavior for you, and that is mostly due to some limitations in certain platforms and also security considerations for those platforms. But for the web, we do expose it, as it is probably something that a lot of people would want to do on the web platform. I get that this can be like a weird topic to understand. So if there's any questions around this, yeah, feel free to ask. As a summary, if you do enable this, then URLs will automatically open. By default, it's false. So now URLs will no longer automatically open. But of course, you can just handle the case for a URL event coming through. I think that's the main summary there.
That was great. And in fact, the whole time I was doing consideration of your cheating at code allegations, and I found you not guilty. So that's great. That means, do you think we have time in the next 19 minutes to live code some sound stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I think it would be nice to drop Michael's sounds in. And then, yeah, you guys feel free to ask questions as we do it.
Yeah, definitely. We have plenty of time for questions, and this will be a little more informal, so I will feel free to interrupt Gordon at any time as those questions come in. Did you get the handle events question already?
I didn't see that, no.
Okay, so with automatically handle events, is true, you don't have to write any additional code to make the links work.
That is correct.
Okay.
There's also some considerations for what the automatic behavior will be in the future for share links, maybe in the future as well on the community page. As of this stage, we are not handling automatic URLs in the community page due to security considerations and still figuring some stuff out from that perspective.
Yeah, and we don't know what kind of links you're going to include in your stuff, Jeff, okay? Don't be linking me to MySpace and all that stuff. All right, go for it, Gordon.
Yeah, before we dig into the live code section, I would say definitely take a look at the documentation. There's a section for the editor that describes everything from a design perspective. And of course, we also have a section for runtimes, which is also called drive events, which I'm already on. So yeah, you'll see events in both of these. So yeah, take a look at these. You'll also note that we have code for all of our runtimes. So if web is not your platform of choice, we have examples for all of the major runtimes. You'll also find additional examples in the example projects on GitHub for these respective runtimes.
Does that also mean that links won't work when using the iframe embed?
If Zach is still in the chats, he would know better than I do.
I'm also sending him a message right now.
I think the plan would be to still enable it, but even if it's not enabled, it might be an easy thing to add. Yeah, Zach says yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thanks, Zach. Okay, from a coding perspective, some people like to start from scratch. I like to copy. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna see if we can just first play Michael's animation, and then from there we can work our way back. So as an example, we have the NeoStream v2.rev. So I'm going to drag in Michael's animation, which I'm not even sure I have. Let me get it. I could have swore I got it. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to export it.
All I'm going to say is that the cheating accusations are back on the table, Gordon.
I'm fine with it. It's like art. The base code you need to steal.
Let me know if you want me to grab it too, Gordon.
I just got it.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm gonna. You can't see this because I'm just sharing a window. I'm dragging in a new file. Or at least I'm trying to. Oh, okay. Small problem. We won't be able to actually do it with this. If you take a look at this example as is, it actually won't work on Safari because Safari needs additional audio permissions. And I'm not signed in to Safari I'm not signed into my account right now. Sorry, I'm
That's okay.
gonna be a letdown.
We'll just say that we're now accusing Safari of lack of permissions, and I find them guilty. Okay, so we're gonna hang out here for a few minutes and wait for a few questions if anyone has any. Gordon, I'll throw you a couple questions. Well, I have one.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the most important thing about events is that like designers should know? Like, what should we keep in mind when we're working with events? Like, what one piece of advice that you'd give?
I'd say not to overthink it. I think it can be easy to get lost in like when should you report it versus what should be reported, and whether something is needed. I'd opt in for the approach of like using or reporting events when the need arises for them. So what I mean by that is it may be unneeded or unnecessary to add a hover event if you don't plan on implementing that hover event in code. It may be unneeded to add a hover event if your engineer is intending to use the artboard in a different way. So for example, if all you're making is a button and all that button is rendered to the screen, then from a coding perspective, you have what you need to add a hover state to that artboard already. So you don't need to actually have a hover event in that instance. So I'd say see as the needs arise. If the question comes up, hey, I need this information, then find the correct spot for that event to be sent down.
Yeah. And I would think like in most cases, if you're a designer and a developer duo, or you're working on a team, that if you don't get all, like from a design perspective, if we don't get all the right events in there, somebody's going to be like, hey man, I need to know when this thing goes to this thing. And we'll be able to go back and add events. So I don't think it'll be that much trouble getting all the events, the right events added in there.
Yeah.
Jeff has another question. Does automatically handle events also change the cursor? So if you want to change it to something different, will automatically handle events change it?
No. A quick way to think about it is that a general event for future events added as well, general events won't be handled automatically because you can define that to be anything. There's no way for the runtime to know what to do. And that particular one is a general event that JC made called onHover, is hovering true false. I think there could be a discussion for events that are common that might make it easier for you to maybe do things like this. But I think for now, having the flexibility with general events to kind of code your own path is probably the most extensible way to look at it.
can I follow up on what I think is, as a
Yes.
designer, is the
Please.
most helpful, aside from syncing with the dev you're going to be working on, is just keeping an eye on the actual event icon animation, like seeing those events fire. You kind of know as you're interacting with your animation that those are all triggering, or what's our phrasing? What is our terminology for when an event is actually
Reported.
Okay, so when
Reporting
those report,
live.
yeah, because I was actually trying to make a loop, so this audio clip would play after a certain loop, and I had tried to set it up in one way, and it wasn't reporting, but was able to get it to work via a timeline key. And so just that's kind of nice as a designer to be able to see visually like that feedback. So I will say I would assume that if you're seeing that on your artboard, that you can, for the most part, trust that that event is being reported correctly and at the correct time.
Yeah, for me, thinking now, maybe one of the more difficult part for the designer is to know when apply the event in the state or in the timeline or in the other part. Yeah, why you need to. In general, I guess when you want to report the event and the property, the best option is the timeline because it's the only place you can do that. But between the stage and the transition, sometimes it's difficult to know. For the reason, it's good to speak with the developer. Hey, what do you think what is the best option for that? But yeah, I guess this part at the beginning can be something difficult. Yeah.
Actually, piggybacking off of that question, or that statement rather, Gordon, when would we actually apply something to a transition or a state instead of actually keying the property on the timeline? Or will we always be keying a property on the timeline and reporting it through the state or transition, or on the timeline itself? Like, when would we ever just report an event?
If you don't want to update the name of the event. So like we showed you the way of like having the sound event with a name attached to it and then updating the names. Nothing stops you from creating 10 sound events. So like the event name would be sound 1, sound 2, sound 3, and then you can just fire those and you don't need to worry about updating the name of the property. The thing about that is it's a little bit less scalable, at least from a coding perspective, because then in your code, you need to handle all of those switch case statements for all of the sound names, or maybe do something like if the name starts with sound, do something. So that's one scenario is essentially if you don't need to update the name, or if you don't need to update the properties in the timeline, you can just fire it. If you are updating the properties and you want to communicate that the property changed, I'd say the timeline is the best place to report it. But yeah, Michael's example of playing one sound at the start and another sound at the end, I think that was also a really good example of where you would want to use the different places where you can report an event.
Cool. All right. Well, if nobody has any more questions out in the chat, Michael, JC, do you have any more questions or anything like that we want to?
No, I'm thinking now I want to try to recreate the icon of the event in animation, make the same, add an event, and play to trigger the animation and the event at the same time. Because maybe if I do that, maybe I can create a black hole,
It's event inception. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's happening?
So yeah.
We're tearing a hole in the time-space event.
If the universe destroy today, it's because I
Would we even know if it was destroyed? I don't know. That's a question that we can debate another time. All right. thanks for hanging out, everybody. That's going to be it for the workshop. I'll try and go back and add some timestamps in here to make this easily navigatable. Gordon, if you have any docs, anything like that that you want me to put in there, let me know, and I'll do that as well. Like always, if you have more questions, hit us up on Discord, ask in the help channel. The help channel is always the best one to use when we have questions come in because it's easy to actually organize and stuff like that. But other than that, that's going to be it for the streaming this week. Remember, we got Tuesday live stream next week. And if you're going to be participating in the It's Alive challenge, you got a due date, Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Central Time. I think that's it. I think that's all the housekeeping. Yeah, if you make anything with events, make sure you share it. Let us know what you think. Thanks for hanging out, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.